Welcome to Conversations for Peace with me, Pastor Jule, and my guest for October is Delmarie Brownridge. Delmarie, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
We're so glad you're here. This is super fun. I should let our listeners know a few things. Delmarie is actually joining us from down under in Australia. So that's an exciting thing. And Del, do you want to tell us how the weather is there today?
Oh, it's a bit gloomy and no sunshine today, and it's supposed to be spring. So I'm not
Oh,
sure what's happening to the sun today.
we had a beautiful sunny day here, so we're hogging all the sun over here, I
Maybe
guess.
that's what's happening. Yep.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Dell lives in Adelaide, Australia, where I had the wonderful opportunity to visit her and her family. Oh, it's been over 2 years ago now.
Yep. But we enjoyed and loved having you and wish we could do that soon again.
Yes, have to do it again soon, for
Yep.
sure. And okay, so I love to introduce a little bit more my guests, like my first impression of my guests. But I have to be honest and say, I don't really remember my first impression because we met like over 30 years ago now,
Yep. A long
right?
time.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us aging folks to remember 30 years ago, right?
Well, maybe I could remember a bit of it, but I mean, not everything.
Yes. And I know a bit of what I remember is that I don't think this was our first meeting. I think that we got to know each other through Mr. Messiah's school days, right?
Yep.
And then Delmarie came over for a high tea.
That's correct. That's correct. For
We
some
both remember
brownies.
the high tea.
Yep.
Yeah, because here I was at that time. I mean, I don't even know that I was 25 at that time.
No, you
I
weren't.
wasn't. We
No,
weren't. Yeah,
no,
we were
no.
very young. And I was staying with a friend in South Africa between my years of divinity school, just for the summer, which was winter in South Africa, Cape
Of
Town
course.
area. And we had to have high tea. Delmarie is a teacher. She's going to tell you more about that. But we had to have high tea one afternoon after a long day of school. And I was just adamant that I was going to like share some American delights with you. You remember this?
Yes, of course I do. And then I was supposed to be your caretaker and take you as I was the personal shopping assistant
You were
and
my
taking you
personal
around to, yep,
shopping. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Taking you to the
But
malls and shops.
yeah, yeah. She was like my ride, right? You would get me out
Yep.
of there and be like, "Come on, Jewel, let's go." But I appreciate that we stayed friends even after you attempted. I don't even know that you took a full bite of my brownies at our high
No,
tea.
I don't think I
Um,
did.
I just
I
let's just
probably
say I'm
just,
not
I
the
probably
best.
just, I probably just grabbed some of the uh, manufactured M&Ms would probably be better than
That's
homemade
right.
stuff.
It was a very healthy tea.
Yep.
I didn't have any checks mix with me on that day and time, so
No, you
that
didn't.
was a bummer.
Yep.
But yeah, so we had an wonderful experience, just hitting it off. Delmarie took me around. I had to find a dress for my friends. I was actually officiating at their
Wedding.
ceremony, and
Yeah,
yeah, you helped me find that. So,
that's correct. And the rest is
but
history.
it's the rest is history.
Yep.
What I do remember though from first meeting you, you have the most amazing little giggle. So we've had a lot of giggles over the
Yeah.
years. Um, I was thinking about our time in Central Park in New York City, and I was,
Rainy Central Park.
rainy Central Park, and you and your husband Kevin were just like, "Come on, let's go!" Like, so what if it's raining? This is our day to be in Central
Of
Park. So
course, of course.
you have this amazing flexibility to you, which of course I love, and you really are one of the best listeners in the world. So I can attest to that because I know several people, and I think
Yep.
you're the best listener in the world, at least in
Thanks for
my
that.
world. Yes.
Thanks. Yep.
Um, and pretty darn sharp as well. So you got to be careful if you play cards with Delmarie.
Yep. Oh no,
And her,
no. I don't think I've mastered that yet. I have a very good memory, but I don't think that game is made
that
for me.
we were trying to teach her our family fun card game, and that didn't go that well. But
No,
anyway, we still have fun. We still have
we
fun. We
did, we
always have
did,
fun.
we did.
Lots of memories. And I mean, like, amazingly, over these 30 years, you live in Australia now. I live in Nashville, Tennessee still. Well, again, I should say. And over these years, we really have. We've met up in several different places.
We
So mainly
have.
in
We
the US,
on three different continents.
three different continents. Yes,
Yep,
amazing.
yep.
And so, why don't you tell our guests a little bit more about you and what you want us to know as we get started with this Conversations for Peace, so that I don't
So
give away all the secrets. You go for
no,
it.
no worries. So as Jule said, we've met in South Africa all those years ago, and that's where I was born and bred. And I spent 35 years of my life in South Africa and teaching there for 13 of those. And then at the start of 2001, my family and I, my husband and my two daughters, we immigrated to Australia, and we've been here ever since. And where I picked up my teaching career again, and I am still teaching in Adelaide, South Australia. I think I'm a fairly loyal person. I've only taught at one school in South Africa, and the same thing is happening in Australia. I've just been to one school as well.
Well, once you get you there, nobody wants to lose you. So
I think so. I
I
hope
know that
so.
is
I
true.
hope so.
I know that is
Or
true. I hope your principal is listening. Don't let her
oh,
go, even though we appreciate you letting her go on Fridays.
yep, 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 yep. And so
Yeah.
yes, so as I said, I have a husband, Kevin, and I have two daughters, and they are 32 and 27, and we've been here for just under 24 years.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. I remember when you first told me you were moving to Australia. I was like, "What?" Do you want to share with our listeners a little bit about like what that was like to decide to leave your homeland and all
That
of
was
your extended family?
Yep. So I think that I mean we placed on this earth and not necessarily just in one place. My roots will always be in South Africa, but my branches have been spread all over the world, and I think that is where my branches are right here. And one of the things when I did immigrate, I always said that I am not changing myself. I am changing my postal code, or as the Americans would say, I've just changed my zip code. Yeah, I
Yes.
haven't changed anything else. Even though my roots are still going to be there in South Africa, I've just spread myself to
Mhm.
another country, and it doesn't mean that when you leave a country, you're going to leave your models and values behind. Those models and values would follow you wherever you go.
Right, right. And those connections. I know you all love to travel. Like
Yeah.
how many countries have you traveled?
I've been to 29 so far.
29. That's amazing. That is
Yeah.
just absolutely amazing.
I really have a love for traveling. I have a love for different cultures, and I am a foodie. I love tasting foods from different parts of the world and just meeting people and just seeing how diverse people are. But uh, we're all humans and we all have the same traits, and it doesn't matter if we speak another language, we're still the same on so many levels.
Right. Like, even if you don't speak proper English, as I don't, as you remind me now and again, it's okay. We're still so the same and connected in a lot of
Of
ways.
course,
So,
of course, of course.
right. And
Uh,
I think we both share that deep commitment to family as well, right? And
yep.
so,
Family
deep
is so
commitment.
important, and also, like, I mean, friends become family, and you, it's just the way you deal with people, and just being mindful. I think that's important of others, and it doesn't mean if that person can't speak your language, that person is different to you, because it
Right.
doesn't mean English is the only language. When you
It's
hear
not,
somebody
is
speaking with
it?
an accent, you know that that person speaks another language.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, you've teased me over the years that, like, we're not proper Queen's English here in the
No,
US.
no.
So it sounds as if we have an accent to you. I know that.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole
Yeah.
not just South African or South Australian, but South United States accent that can kind of come through now and
Of
again.
course, of course, of course. But it
I'm
doesn't make
sorry.
you any less of a person. It's just that we just
Right,
speak differently. Yep.
right, right. We're just a little bit further away from the Queen and the King
We
now
are,
of
we
England
are, we
than
are.
you all are. So, what else do you like really love to do that like fills your time? Like, when you're not teaching.
As I said before, like I do enjoy traveling. I am also somebody that I in not necessarily like you enjoy long, long walks in nature, but I do enjoy nature and watching nature go by. I love the ocean and I'm a bit of a people watcher. I love just sitting on a bench and just watching people and I don't know, I've got that personality where I feel that strangers always wanting to have a conversation with me and just having a chat and just meeting people. But traveling is probably one of the things I enjoy most, and just being in nature and just having some quiet time. I'm quite comfortable in my own conversation as well. I don't necessarily have to have heaps and heaps of people around me to make me feel accepted and wanted. I'm quite
Right, right.
comfortable in my own in my own company as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
Well, and I will admit, like, in the little bit I've traveled the world, not nearly as many
yeah.
countries or continents as you, but you do live in one of like the absolute most beautiful areas. When Kevin took us to like hike over there in your park over in Hallett Cove, can you tell our listeners anything about Hallett Cove? This is like an important place in the
It is so
globe
important.
on
In
the globe.
fact, in terms of not wanting to harp on the past, but with my past, uh, the ocean or living near the ocean wasn't a right. You know, it wasn't something
Mm,
that we could just live wherever we wanted to when we lived in South Africa. But this was pre 1994. But
hmm
just being able to come to another country and choosing where you're wanting to live, and one of the reasons we chose to live in Hallett Cove because it's so close to the ocean, it's so easily accessible, and we could choose, obviously depending on our financial position, choose where we wanted to live, and that is how we
hmm
chose to live in Hallett Cove, to be close to the ocean, and I do think this is the most beautiful part of Adelaide. And for those who don't know Adelaide, Adelaide's known as a city of churches, and it's also previously known as the 20-minute city because every suburb is 20 minutes from the city. So it's a very closed and
hmm
community, but very but lots and lots of things to offer.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Was I there like 4 or 5 weeks, however many weeks it was.
yeah.
We still didn't get to explore
No,
everything.
no, there's
So
so much. So we've got the hills on the one side and we have the ocean on the other side. So you know exactly where you're going. When you speak about the ocean or about the hills, people would know what you're talking about. But it's a very,
yeah,
very pretty, pretty city.
very pretty. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that Indian Ocean right there at Hallett
Of
Cove is
course,
so
of
beautiful.
course, of course.
And oh, isn't it the Gawandin? Is that what it's called? The Gawandin supercontinent comes together there. It's one of the
That's
points
correct.
where,
Of
yeah,
course, yeah,
I may
yeah,
not be pronouncing that quite
yeah,
right, but that
yeah.
and the cliffs there on that at Hallett Cove,
It's such a
whatever
yearly,
it's how it's
it's
so
such a yearly suburb. I don't think cyclists would do well here, but I mean, there's so much hills and you never get tired because there's always another trail that you could go on. So there's lots of
right.
walking trails, lots of bicycle trails, and lots of conservation parks and nature,
hmm
botanical gardens, and just the indigenous and the fauna that we have and the different trees. I know that you were amazed by all the different trees and especially the gum trees, and no tree
Right,
looks alike, and probably because you were here just after winter as well, so you could see how
right.
green everything was. Yep,
It was so beautiful. Right.
yeah, it's
Yes,
very
and that
beautiful.
gum tree where all those that whole family lived inside. Yeah,
Of course,
it
of
was
course.
interesting. And
And
part
also,
of
I
why
mean,
I came there was,
was the
not only. Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
No, no, I'm not just was just about to tell you about your German and your Dutch heritage, and there were
Yeah.
this place that you went to and that you could.
Go for it. You tell all about it.
No, you tell me. You go, boy. You enjoyed that part of it, didn't you?
Yeah, well, because of course, I wanted to be on my Holy Global Trek, able to be with you. And originally, before COVID, I was supposed to be at a family celebration. So I missed that, but we still had great opportunities to be together. And I also was very curious about this city of churches, right? And um, one of my overarching questions on my Holy Global Trek was like, why do people end up where they end up? Um, and we were really opening up around hospitality and what is it like to land in a different place. And I was so struck in is it Handel and Landorf?
Ha,
What was it called?
Handorf and Lobethal.
There we go. You got this. You got it right. She got it right because she took me there. Anyway, so, but I was so struck. The Germans that I met there came from a very similar area where my own family had
Of
immigrated on my
course.
maternal side. They like immigrated to the U.S., but others in that area immigrated to Australia. And so, just that question of like, why do people go? And my dear friend David, remember my dear friend David?
Yep,
um, David said to me, push pull, Jule, push pull. Like as I was like getting ready to even go, it's like what pushes the people to depart and what pulls the people to a certain place.
of
So
course. We're all global citizens, and if you think about it, I mean, my journey coming over was was such a soft landing and so much easier. But could you imagine what these Germans and Dutch people had to go through when they came all those years ago? They were months and months on a ship. I mean,
right,
they
right,
didn't come over by plane then, and they never had
right,
machinery or social media or anything we have
right,
today where they could have contact with their families and those things that all probably Morse code and telegrams and snail mail, and those are the things that they were dependent on. So it's
right.
really brave of them. But as I said, being global citizens, I'm sure, you know, they paved the way for so many others.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and just my I actually was able to read a little like early reader book to my parents before they passed. I read them this book that was trying to help capture like what was it like for this particular group of what was called the Volga Germans, which is Germans that had left Germany to try and make a better home around the Volga River in Russia, and then that didn't go so well, and then they eventually left. They just couldn't really find their place, and so many of them did come to the U.S. or to Canada or to Australia of the Volga Germans, and I was able to read a little book to my parents about that, and it just opened our mind and our appreciation for just the strength of our ancestors. My great grandmother and her family coming over on my maternal side, if that is in fact what was recorded in that book of it's kind of humiliating too
Of
in some
course.
ways, and they didn't speak the language, and
And many
you
of
know
them came at a
hard,
very, very young age as well. Some of them came without their parents, without
right?
their family at such a young age, which
Or they
it can be.
left, like many lived in extended community, but then they left their some of their aunts or uncles or you know um, grandparents behind in order
Yeah,
and maybe their dad and brother went first and then they did. So it was rough. Now you all, fortunately, all four of you did get to go together,
of
right?
course, of course.
And you also do have some other relatives
I
in,
do,
right?
I do.
Yeah.
So a little bit of more background. Like I've myself and I have two younger brothers. So I was when I left South Africa, I was the only girl, and my girls then were the only grandkids. So I could imagine what it was for my parents seeing their only daughter and only grandkids leaving. But over time, they granted us that to go to. They feel that they've had lived their lives, and it's our turn to live, and that is how my brother, my middle brother, he came over
Hmm.
about 2 or 3 years after me, and I'm really grateful that he's done that because my daughters could have an uncle and an aunt, and now they've since had a little girl as well. So we have family here, and one
Hmm.
realizes how important it is. I still have a brother with his a wife and daughter over in South Africa and a dad, but the majority of my immediate family is with me here in Adelaide, which I'm quite grateful for.
You're just the waymaker, the
The one,
trailblazer,
yep,
right?
yep, yep, and like we were talking about global citizens, like my wish is normally that if every person in this world could just travel once out of their country, just to see, especially people in first world developing countries, to go
Right,
uh, um, to a developing country to see what it's like, you know,
right.
just to see how other people live and not just be in your cocoon.
Right, right, definitely.
Yeah,
My first time traveling, oh, we weren't planning to talk about all this, but we're gonna anyway.
yeah,
My first time traveling overseas, my parents were like, "You're gonna do what?" I was um 18, 19. I came
yeah.
home. I called from college, my first year of college, and said, I'm going to go on a sports mission trip out of the country. And they're like, What? You're going to do what? I was going to go play volleyball. This is kind of fun. You know this story, Dal? Have you ever
A
heard me
little
talk
bit,
about
I
this?
think. I'm not sure if it's the same
Yeah, it
one.
may not be the same
Go ahead.
one. I was
Yeah,
going to go play volleyball. I used to be a big time volleyball player, and I was going to go play volleyball in Jamaica. I had a little bit different theological mindset back then, so that would probably not be a trip I would have taken if I
yeah.
were going now. But it was a Christian Sports International trip, and we would play volleyball, and then we would engage with people, have conversations with people, and basically we were like, we were like sharing Jesus, if you will, and trying to help people like learn about Jesus, as if the people I was so naive, but as if the people we were going to meet had never heard of,
Yeah.
Jesus, or didn't know anything about love, whatever. But while I was there, I just had this like intense experience because of where I had been raised in this you've been there, to this little Dutch town in Wisconsin, where if you're not Dutch, you're not much. And it's all about how blonde your hair is and how
Of course,
pristinely
of
blue your
course.
eyes are. That's what I grew up around, when a town of less than 2,000 people. I had a chance to get out and about. My sister lived in Madison, is still living in Madison, so my family would travel to the big city routinely, and we're exposed to other people. But most people, that's like their little place where they are. And in Jamaica, I was in Jamaica for this sports mission trip, and I had never seen poverty. I had never seen it, believe it or not. It's hard to believe. I had never seen a homeless person. I had never seen an orphan. And I was exposed to all of that, and it was like overwhelming. And it was
Yeah.
there on that trip and kind of times of reflection where I experienced call to ministry, actually. So
So I mean,
I don't
so
know if you knew
everything
that.
happens for a reason, you know what I mean? So that's
Yeah,
why hope is that everybody travels to a developing country to see how other people live, and that,
right.
first world
Right.
countries are not the only way to live.
It's
There's
not the
lots of
only way. And
no.
even like Jamaica is not like, it's not totally
Yeah,
totally undeveloped. And we
of
were
course.
in places that were not, the ritzy place, if you will. But
Yeah,
um so yeah, I too have been able to travel. And as a pastor, I typically travel for some kind of either missional kind of thing or educational kind of thing, or going to help make a connection that a church might be able to work with a community later on. So I've traveled to some weird places, but
but I
but it's been
mean,
great.
but you learn all the time as you go along. So you, as your role in ministry, you look at things differently. Whereas when I travel, I look through my teacher eyes, and how
Hmm.
I could maybe do my job differently or see things differently. So I think traveling does enrich you, and it's
Definitely.
something that you can't really attach a monetary value to, even though
Right.
it is becoming more and more expensive. But I think it's something that enriches you as a person, and also to see how you can contribute, not necessarily only to your own community, but to other communities as well.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and sometimes it's to learn to appreciate, and sometimes it's to learn that you may not be as advanced as you think you
of
are.
course, of
Right?
course, of
So
course,
the
of
rhetoric
course.
of your nation may not be the only way. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
that's always mind opening as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your teaching. And I don't know, where do you want to go with your teaching?
Oh my
Part of why I
gosh.
wanted to talk with you is because you have had this very interesting teaching career.
I
Um,
have. So,
Want to tell us all about it?
yep. So, as I said, I taught very conventionally uh, in like subjects when I was in South Africa because I was trained as a accounting and economics teacher, and that is what because actually initially I always wanted to be a chartered accountant, and that didn't materialize. I became an accounting teacher,
Yeah.
and with that mindset, I came over to Australia to realize that the public school system here doesn't really have subjects like economics and accounting,
Oh, okay.
and that was very limiting for me because I had to start thinking outside of my comfort zone. So when I started at my current and only school in South Australia, uh, I started then teaching all these other subjects that was presented to me over the years because I was contracting. So in order to make yourself more employable, you had to just be open to any subjects that they were
Mm,
needing a teacher in. So I started doing literacy, numeracy. I even taught Australian studies. Then I went on to teach maths, and I just
yeah.
taught a whole so
Hooray.
many variety of subjects, and that is how I just really went out of my comfort zone. And then I went into to teach adults. I taught kids with special needs, and then there was a gap where they wanted somebody to do their timetabling, just to do the timetables for the school, and I had done that in South Africa for a little bit, and I said, well, I'll have a go, even though it was computerized. And then I started doing timetabling, and that I did for a while. So I had my finger in every pie, any subject you can think of. The only time I drew the line was I said, I'm not teaching physics, not teaching anything to do with biology or chemistry, but everything else I started just having a go at. And what makes it not easier, but when the students realize that you are learning with them and you become the
Mm,
learner, I think you're able to impart knowledge much easier doing it that way. And
right.
then eventually they were looking for a caretaker to look after a group of young mums that were returning to school to
Hmm.
complete their we call it the grade 11 and 12, where that makes up their they can graduate from high school by doing that.
Hmm.
And so I was only supposed to caretake for a year, and next year will be my 10th year. So I teach young mums. They
Yeah.
return. I've got a little playroom attached to my classroom. They're welcome to bring their babies and their toddlers along with them. And I have this holistic approach
Hmm.
where I teach them everything they need to be able to graduate from school. And to me, I find it very, very rewarding, very different to mainstream, but it's really it's a program or a way of teaching where you can see your fruits being
Hmm.
right there.
Right.
Everything
Right.
just changes because what they're doing is they wanting a better life for their children, and they may not have realized this previously, but since becoming a mum, they're wanting to be the best mum they can. And that is
Yeah.
why they're returning, wanting to be their role models for their children. And they're there voluntarily. They're not there because they're getting any extra money or whatever. They're
Mhm.
doing it because they're wanting to do it. And I think that makes the difference, that they're there
Yeah.
because they're wanting to do it. So it's a very,
They're
very
really,
reward.
yeah, they're really wanting to be able to make a good life for themselves and their child, right?
Yep.
So,
And it's on a flexible timetable. So
hmm.
they only come in Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and they can choose whatever times they're wanting to come in between 9 and 3. And Thursdays they quite open to go to a playgroup or a childcare center, and Fridays is their time to do whatever shopping or anything that they needing to do. So it's a very, very flexible for
Yeah,
them as well as for myself.
like
Yeah.
helps it helps take away the hurdles to being a student and a young mom.
It
right?
does.
And
It does. And a little bit of background about my school. My school is in a low socioeconomic area, so there are lots of students coming from these homes that they may be the first one in their family to graduate.
oh wow,
So they breaking that poverty cycle. They wanting the best for their kids, and I think that is the thing that makes them tick and wanting to do what they are doing.
right,
And
right,
in so doing, they are actually physically showing their role modeling for their child that to go to school, and they learning with their child. If their child's at grade one or in reception or at prep, they studying
yeah,
at the same time, which is so good.
that's
So they're
amazing. Yeah,
breaking down that generational poverty and with family
right, wow,
dysfunctional families. Yeah,
right. That's amazing. It's so
yeah.
amazing. And I remember when you were telling me about this, um, just that the kid, I mean, the little kids come along too, right? The children
Of
come with
course,
them.
of course, of course.
Yeah.
So there's lots of role modeling happening, and and something that I wasn't aware of, that some of them come from dysfunctional families where they've had lots of trauma. So they coming into this not formal setting. I mean, I won't call my classroom a formal setting, but this space where they feel welcomed, where it's their safe place, and where
Right.
at the same time they are gaining an education, but also seeing that there is life outside their homes, and that there is a
Hmm.
way that they can break the cycle. And I see that happening where they're going on to find jobs, and they are more employable, and they are breaking that cycle that they were born into, which is very, very
Yeah.
rewarding for me and for them.
And that's so amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
And and part of what I love about it too is it sounds like a community gets formed, with
it
not
does.
only with you, but with your students and with their
Of
children.
course. And
And
one thing I probably omitted was that I am the one presenting the curriculum, but I also have two case managers that works with me, and they look after the well-being side. So they
hmm,
would be the ones that are directing the students to, if they need any support outside of the classroom in terms of
hmm,
mental health, or support with a child, or employment, or childcare, or anything like that. So there's a support system and a system that works, where
right.
obviously our our jobs there is a bit of a gray line, because I mean, if my student is not in the right space to learn, obviously it's going to be impact the well-being is going to impact the education. But I know that because I know
Hmm.
my students well. So we are really a good team where we work with the student in curriculum as well as well-being, and seeing that they in the right space of mind to be able to, for me to
Yeah.
impart knowledge. Yeah, so we have a good
Right.
support
And
system.
it's like you're the big mama in the classroom.
I am,
Like,
I
you're
am,
like,
I am, I
you
am.
do that so well, right?
I'm the nanadel. Sometimes the students would remark and say that their 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 children see more of me than they
Mm.
see of their own family, which is quite
Oh
sad,
wow. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
some of them come while they're pregnant, some of them come once they've had their baby, and those that are pregnant when they do arrive to my program, they could stay home for 6 weeks and
Hmm.
get used to their baby. But after a week or so, they're dying to come to introduce their baby, and so it's a
Aw.
real community, which it's nice to see how they grow over the years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and you have them over the years, right? It's
We
not
do,
like
we
they,
do.
oh, now they're moving on to the
No,
next
no, no. So
grade.
they can stay until they reach the age 25. So many of them
Wow.
take about 3 or 4 years to finish it. So there's
Hmm.
no rush. So they
Hmm.
know that I'm going to be the teacher for the entire time. So sometimes they start the 1 year and they finish the subject in the next year. So there's lots of no work they do is unnecessary.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And you do some life skills? Am I right about that? Or
Yes, we do.
is
We
that
do.
yeah?
So we have partnerships coming in who teach them parenting. We have several programs where they go to childcare centers where they do parenting programs. They're doing do safety. They do baby first aid. There's a range of
Mm,
things that they do in the community so that once they leave us, they'll have a connection to their community.
right. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So even
Aw, so
they've even had lots of input where one of the Baptist church wanted to have a childcare center attached to the play area or the cafe or something, and they negotiated with my girls and they went and gave them some advice of what to do and what they would like to see in the play areas, which was
oh,
quite good.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they felt they were part of that
Yeah.
decision
Empowering,
making.
right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
so many girls, I always call them girls. Many of the students would go on to do lots of courses where they empowered with domestic violence. There's lots of women empowerment groups that they do join, which is
Hmm.
good as well. Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome. And it's all girls, right? It's all your girls.
Of course, yeah,
So
yeah.
they're also like
Ah,
learning in that bubble of they're with other young women or
yeah,
moms as well, right?
with similar interests, wanting to do the same thing. I wish something like this could be replicated for males as well, like maybe a young dads group where
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
they could come back, but it seems as if just the women are targeted. Are they the ones willing? I'm not sure whether we would be able to get a group of 20 dads together to be able to do the same program.
That would be
That would
not a
be
class I'd
interesting.
want to teach, but
I think
but it would
so.
be interesting. It would
It
be
would be
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
just to see the dynamics and to be able to compare. I think that would be interesting for me.
Right, right.
Yeah,
A little experiment.
yeah.
So is your school unique? Are these programs happening in other places in the
No,
city or around Australia?
so I'm the our school is the only program in the south
Okay.
that has, but there are similar programs, but not where the mum could actually bring the child with them to school.
Okay.
The other programs would just be,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's pretty unique, and we've had lots of attention from the governor and the member of parliament wanting to know what's happening and having
Right.
visited our program. So we are pretty unique for to attract that attention.
I still have my newspaper.
Oh yeah, we made
I think it was like the day
front
I
page.
arrived.
Yeah,
Yes, you were like splashed across the front page, and
yeah.
it's like, "There's Dell."
Of
So
course, of course. So that's
yeah,
exciting. Yeah.
reporting on. And wasn't the Queen going to come to visit you?
Yeah, wish the governor, the
The governor.
subsidiary
The
of the
governor.
Queen. Yeah,
That's right, right, right.
that's correct.
Because at the time the Queen was still alive.
Of
So
course, she was
you want to
the
explain this whole thing with the Queen and the King in Australia?
so Australia is not a republic, so we
Good.
still under the Commonwealth, so we still ruled by the King. So each state has a governor that's appointed by the King,
Okay.
and we report to the governor. So that's quite
Got it.
interesting. Yeah,
Got it. Yeah.
yeah.
So was that how the government was set up in South Africa?
No, we're a republic. No, no, no.
Yeah.
We've got so
Yeah.
that's why. So we have a prime minister. We don't have a president.
Yes.
Australia has a
And you've
prime
had
minister.
some you have a prime minister in Australia.
We do. We've had some
Correct.
interesting presidents in South Africa. Yes,
Yes, you have. Who's been your favorite? Am I allowed? You know,
of
many
course.
of our listeners do not know much at all about South Africa. I'm just telling
Well,
you.
my favorite,
Shocking.
who's no longer alive, is obviously none other than Nelson Mandela. So, I mean, I'm sure
Amen.
people know
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela. Yep, that
Well,
was my
if they
favorite.
don't, what would you say it's important to know about Mr. President
I
Mandela?
actually had written a few quotes
Yeah.
uh, because I feel that he was just a man of I don't know, just I can't even explain. Because one of the things he says is education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, and that is just so
Mm,
profound. And another one he says it is in your hands to make a better world for all who live in it. So I think that's a very, very important lesson that we can take out of
definitely.
that. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, such an honorable man. And I don't know if you went with me to Robben Island. I don't think so.
No, no.
Um, but somebody took me there when I was in Cape Town the first time. I think the first time. Anyway, I had a chance to explore Cape Town. I was in Cape Town in 95, was it? 90,
90, yeah, 90, 94.
94?
Nine,
And
yeah. No,
and
95.
Mandela had been 95. Mandela had been elected. He was elected in 94, wasn't he?
That's correct,
93?
yeah.
Yeah,
94.
94. So there was all of that, like amazing. So if you don't know the history of Mandela, I'll share a little bit, and Delmarie can correct me. But Nelson Mandela, as a young man, was somebody who was fighting against apartheid in South Africa, and apartheid. I have a fascination with learning about apartheid because of the Dutch connection. So I will say I have a little guilt about that, if you will. And so being able to explore and learn about like what was this Dutch colonializing empire about, and the way the Dutch, when they got a little bit of power, I hope I'm not saying anything terrible, but when they got a little bit of power in South Africa, they were going to hold on to it. Like, I mean, Dutch can be like very hard headed people, right? So
Yeah.
they were going to hold on to it, and they set up a whole system. It theologically was based on an understanding that God actually desires apartness, like separation, which is like so not true and theologically accurate, but that was the reading at the time. This was in the 40s, this began, 1940s, Del, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, and there was a tension in the rest of the world on what Hitler and the Nazis were doing at the time, and so I'm sure it was all connected in many ways. However, Nelson Mandela was a young man, like trying to kind of fight against this. There were horrible things happening. I've spoken a little bit about that in some of our podcasts, but also in some of my sermons, and um, he ended up arrested, right? Because he was kind of a leader. He
27
ended up
years.
27 years held at Robben Island, mostly in Robben Island,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. Majority of the time. Yeah.
By the time you got, yeah, kind of where some of the other leaders had been as well of the party,
Yeah.
of the movement against apartheid, um, who were, some of the stories I've heard is that that experience, and he grew as a man as well, right? He was a young man when he went to prison, and he continued to kind of have this reflective, meditative um, experience, and still that passion for like we all need to have equality and all need to be able to live free. And
And not
over
also,
time, go ahead.
and also not being any grudges or any hate speech or anything.
Yeah,
Just
it
so
was like
human.
it was like you've seen the stones, right, in the quarry
Yeah.
where they
Yeah.
had to
That
like.
was, to me, that was very, very profound.
Yes, definitely. And so they would be sent to this quarry every day with like a pickaxe and just have to like, you know,
Limestones. Yep.
try to like cut cut through this with bare hands. It's horrible, hot, you know, physical manual labor, these like learned, young men. And I kind of have this sense that that experience in and of itself kind of maybe wore off some of his own edges so that there were no grudges that were held, and he came to that understanding like there has been bloodshed in our land for forever from like the 4th century on, and there's been warring between folks for forever, no matter who it had been, as throughout some of the history, and that is not the way. Like we are a nation of many many languages and many backgrounds and many ancestries, and we must come together. Like there's no future with violence. And so, I mean, came out of prison and gets elected, right? Like, what
Of
year was he
course.
released from prison? 91,
92.
92? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and did not retaliate, did not like go after the Afrikaners and, the Dutch Afrikaners who had been in charge at that point. Even had de Klerk as part of his cabinet,
Yeah,
correct?
that's correct. Yes.
Previous president who had been living by this apartheid way, and really said it's time to like come together and to accept and bless the gifts of every person, right? And seek. And yet apartheid had taken hold for so many decades, right? And there had been so much oppression racially and also economically, which was all wrapped together, right? And
Of course.
freedoms were based on the color of your skin and your ancestry, and so it was difficult, wasn't it? Difficult to
Yeah, and just
make
to
those
that,
changes.
just and also when you speak to people outside of South Africa, and even conversations I have with people here in Australia, they just can't wrap their heads around
Right.
what we have experienced, what we've lived through, and I mean, for myself, at the age of 29, to be able to vote for the very first time, and where my mum was 30 years my senior, so she was 59, so there were people that were in their 60s and 70s and 80s that have never ever voted before. And
Right.
this was 94 was the first time that they could go and stand in a line to go and vote. So how important voting is, and to cast, and for days people stood in those queues to vote, and that's
Oh
something that
yeah, the lines were so long. I remember seeing all those
would be
images.
etched
Right.
in my mind, that they were eager, that this is their time to be able to have their say, but to
Hmm.
wait that length of time though to do that,
Right.
that is just mind blowing. And that you couldn't live where you wanted to, you couldn't go to certain beaches, and you couldn't, the schools were separated, everything was separated.
Everything was
Yeah,
separated. I remember seeing at Robben Island even like the rules on the wall in terms of what your
yeah.
uniform would be in prison, depending on
What color
your
you
color of
were,
your skin, which, and Mandela had little shorts that he got to wear, right?
of
Like,
course.
and
Yeah,
fewer rations in prison, and just like everything was separate. It's very
yeah.
hard for Americans to wrap our head around that.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
of
of
course.
course, to think that, like, I mean, he fought for our freedom, not only him, but collectively. And so my hope is that we could still reap the benefits. I mean, there are changes, and one's hoping that those changes can happen in my lifetime. But there's so
Hmm.
much to do for those
Right.
changes to, even though it's been 20 years since, more than that.
30. I'm
30,
30.
sorry. Yeah, 30.
Right.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
as
Yeah.
long as we've known each other.
Yeah,
So
30 years. That's a
I
long
mean,
time.
almost. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
long
it's a long
time.
time. But it's
Yeah.
not a long time. It is a long time and it's not at the same
Yeah, yeah. Just to close that
time.
gap, that gap. And in fact, I've just got back from South Africa, and
Mhm.
um, you see changes, but there's definitely a gap between the rich and the poor, and there's may not be uh, apartheid with color, but to me, there's definitely economic apartheid at this moment, where the
Mhm.
gap is just getting bigger and bigger with the high rate
Mhm.
of unemployment and things like that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's just like I was just reading in a book about, it's an indigenous book actually, Indigenous Americans, writing about a kinship worldview, and just like precepts of reclaiming a kinship worldview where like indigenous Americans might be able to help us kind of figure out some of the mess of how we're alienated from one another, but also alienated from the land. And here in the United States, you may not have heard, but we've just had two horrific hurricanes, and always more on the way in this time of
I
year.
heard in Florida, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's awful. In Florida, but North Carolina,
Oh,
Asheville
okay.
is,
All right.
because of all the flooding that's come. There's so much devastation and damage, and continuing to be alienated from the earth. It's causing, I think, it's causing just this climate catastrophes to be taking place, and so this indigenous worldview that the one of the doctors that was writing in this book is writing about the traumatized mind, and how the traumatized mind develops. It ends up being a mind that is fearful often, right? And ends up even a small amount of stress ends up causing that flight or fight kind of
Yeah,
thing happening in your mind. And they were linking it to a traumatized mind actually tends to desire like an autocrat, like somebody who is just going to kind of control, like rule over them, if you will. And so um, it's just fascinating to think about all of the ways that we learn to be apart and learn not to trust. And I know in your classroom, I'm sure you've said you've had students that have been traumatized. They've
of
experienced
course.
quite a
And
bit
as
of
you say,
trauma.
and as you're saying, like students only act in a certain way is because they're trying to hide behind that trauma. And as teachers, we have to be consistent in our approach so
Hmm.
that they could trust again, you know.
Right,
And I think that's one of the reasons some teachers become burnt out is because they wanting to be that constant in that student's life all the time, but you can't be there physically all the time, you know,
right, right,
because that's what they want, because they want to trust. And once you've
right,
won that trust, it makes it so much easier to impart knowledge. Like, I can't teach a student unless I have a relationship with that student. So
right,
my uh, first few days or weeks of being in my class is more about building relationships. And once I have a relationship with the student, that is when I'm able to teach them and be a better teacher, because I have a relationship. Look at how they learn best, what's their preferred way of learning, you know, and not
right,
one
right,
size fits all, you know.
right.
One of the things that I probably live by is I teach my students the way I would have liked my daughters to be taught, have been taught by their teachers. And
Hmm.
that's always when I start with a class, I said, this is my philosophy. And if you feel that I'm not treating you or not to, it wouldn't be intentional, come and speak to me about it, because I wouldn't want you to have any ill feelings, or I'm doing something that's intentional and it's not my intention to do that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Just
Because they,
winning
I
them
mean,
over.
it's the building block of everything, trust, right?
Of
Like if you
course.
can't trust, you can't learn. So,
Yeah. And can you
right.
imagine, I mean, going through your life all the time, not feeling safe, not
Yeah.
sure whether the person can be trusted or not, and especially uh, um, adults in their lives. I think that is
Hmm.
where they
Right.
do struggle the most, is trusting
Well,
adults.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because so many early trauma, for children does, I mean, it's the adults who
Yeah.
create
Yeah.
the trauma for the
Of course.
child.
Of course.
Um,
Of
yeah.
course.
And so it's
And
just one of those reminders of how important it is. I mean, how we interact with children in our lives and how we seek to protect children as well, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
young women, young men as well. So,
And probably
um,
that is why the young mums are so driven, is because many of them wanting to be the mum that they wanted when they were growing
mhm,
up. And I think
right.
that's what their driving force is. I want to be a better mum.
Right. Like,
Uh,
not my child, right? My
no, no,
child's not going to be treated
no,
that
no.
way. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how important literacy and numeracy is. And that's one of the things that I introduced. I said, please read to your child. Reading is
Hmm.
so, so important. Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah,
There's a statistic here in the US, and it's a little bit dated, but that the way at one point in time they were planning prison beds had to do with the third grade reading level, how many children at third grade were not did not have literacy skills. And
yeah.
if so, a bed was built for them later down the
Wow.
road, which is horrible, like horrible.
Yeah,
I hope
yeah,
that statistic has improved. So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
I mean, I can't
what
imagine a life not being literate, you know?
I know, yeah, you know that I couldn't read at the start of my life. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
This is my little pity party. But my mom doesn't even remember this. But
Yeah.
in kindergarten, I just didn't get it. I'm the youngest of five. You know, she was tired. Anyway, and of a different generation. So,
Yeah, yeah,
um, but I couldn't figure out how to read. And so the they kind of took all the kids that were struggling in kindergarten and put them all together. And this was not the title, but it was like we got put into the dumb group kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And so at some point in time in my journey, there was a woman who came. She would take me out of the classroom and bring me to the reading room, and she would teach me how to read. Like I had that extra,
yeah,
help. Like anyway, but I mean there so that's part of my story too. Like there's always that sense of like I don't know enough, or I don't know what everybody else knows because I never
everybody has
did.
a yeah, because
Yeah,
everybody has a different journey, and I think
right.
that's why you're probably always there for the underdogs. So just
I
not
try.
just
Yeah.
to make assumptions, you know what I mean, and just
Right, because
expect,
my
you know.
assumption is always I'm always the stupidest person in the room. That's my assumption. I've just given my little secret away there, but I always assume that I know the least amount of anybody that's in the room, which, you know, I'm not trying to brag at all, but like it's probably not the case.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
I've done a lot. I
But
mean, I'm an
also,
academic, so
also just knowing that people learn differently. Like you can't
right,
have a holistic approach and think one size fits all. Like we all learn differently. Like I was saying that I taught a group of adults, and I
right,
taught a group of the oldest was in his 70s, and English was his second language, and I was teaching him how to read and write,
uh
you
huh,
know, and
yeah,
something that we would just take for granted that somebody at that age should be reading and writing. They could, you
right,
know,
yeah,
so we all have different strengths and different weaknesses, and we will learn differently,
right.
you know.
Well, and I
Yeah.
know from my personal story, I mean, I do not, I remember what this woman looks like. I don't know her name. She's like one of these like silent angels from my past in some ways. I don't know her name. My mom does not even know that this ever was happening, or she didn't remember it at least. But to think of like that, like I did go on to like, graduate top of the class, have a doctorate, whatever. Like I can read now, but there's still that early, kind of experience. But it just reminds me always of how important it is, the work that you and other teachers do, because I mean, you may not be remembered. Your students are going to remember you, but teachers of earlier, children may not be remembered, or they might be. At least the impact that they have had,
Yeah, of course.
definitely, because it
And I
does.
mean,
It takes a whole bunch of people to
of
raise
course,
up a
and also,
child knowing.
but also they also a whole group of teachers where but where students have had bad experiences. I mean, they remember what
Yes,
those
yeah,
teachers did, you know. So
right.
there's good and bad, and like I'm sure that lady that helped you with the reading, I'm sure she was just a volunteer, maybe, you
I
know.
think she was, or like a reading specialist or
So
something. She
something like
wasn't
that.
like one of the
Yeah.
teachers, but
So, I mean, there's so many people in the background that makes our jobs a bit easier or makes our jobs a bit more difficult. But there's
right,
lots and lots of, like, I believe we're all teachers in this world. We're all teaching somebody something,
right,
you know.
yeah,
It's just that
yeah,
I'm in a formal setting teaching someone. I think it's
right,
more that. Yeah.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any other challenges from your role as a teacher you want to share with us, or have you covered the
Oh,
ones that you can legally speak about?
yeah, I mean, like, I think we've probably been talking about those challenges in terms of students that do face trauma, students that come from dysfunctional families where you can't expect them to uh, uh, um, to be able to do homework. There
Mm,
are students maybe we don't even know where their next meal is going to come from. So
right.
there's lots of challenges. So we do have a because my my program is in a flexible learning
Mm-hmm.
facility. We do have where we do get donations of staples, and kids can have a juice or a
Mm-hmm.
cereal or a sandwich, or because I believe that they do need brain food, so we always offer them something to eat. And again, we are a developed country, but there are lots and lots of poverty and, as I said, dysfunction,
As there
and
is in America,
you
right?
know, and but the students that I'm teaching currently, they're wanting to break that cycle, and that
Right.
is so important. So
Right.
again, not making assumptions that that person has eaten, and
Right.
just
Yeah.
think it's they have. So those are the challenges that I face that my students face, and in turn that comes into my classroom.
Hmm.
And because I am the more senior in my group, I think that lots of the teachers are, or the other staff is very reliant on me,
Hmm.
wanting, and sometimes I always say that some of them suck the joy out of me, but at the end of the day, uh, 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 it's not for me. The students are benefiting,
Right.
and
Right.
and
Right.
often you just wanting to give so much of yourself that you can become burnt out,
Right.
and that is something that I'm wanting to avoid, and that's one of the reasons why I have gone part-time, where I only work 4 days a week, and it's good to have that me time to fill your cup again, to
Right.
be ready for the next week, because you'll just be pouring and pouring out of your cup. And if you if you're not going to be able to offer, the best for the student, then it's no use you doing it. But
Right. Yeah.
it's so important that we are advocate for our students, for those that don't have a voice, and that they do have something to eat, and they are able to benefit from, to making it purposeful, their learning purposeful and intentional, and not just for the sake of completing and graduating and leaving with a certificate, but also having some life skills and some lifelong learning for them, not just the
Yeah.
timetables and the ABCs, but also life skills.
And those that joy to continue learning and growing, and
Of
because
course, of course.
as we go through our lives, we have to learn more because our bodies change, our minds change, like
Of course.
circumstances change. You got to
And
adapt. You got to.
and also helping them
Yeah.
with their confidence and their self-esteem, that they can do better if they know
Hmm.
better, you know.
Right. Right.
And that is
Yeah.
so important, just teaching them all the time what they have control over, they can control, and they are
Right.
the driving force, and wanting a better life for them and their child, and or their children or their family, is by using that education, using that
Hmm.
as a vehicle to get out of poverty, and being financially more independent, and being able to be able to support their families in the future,
Hmm.
and maybe pay it
Yeah.
forward, you know
Right.
maybe
Right.
help
Yeah.
others on their way
Yeah.
forward.
Do any of your girls ever come back to help volunteer or
Yeah,
do
we
anything like
do.
that?
We do, like
Yeah.
many of them, because some of them would come back, and some of them would go into beauty or whatever, and then they'll come and they'll wanting some clients to do waxing or
Hmm.
threading, or helping with childcare, or donations, and things like
Yeah.
that. So we do have students wanting to give back, which is good.
Well, I mean,
Which
and
is
that
good.
has to be extra inspiring to your current students because here they're seeing, like, oh, look, this woman did it. I can do it too, right? Like, I
Of
can
course,
carry
of
on in this
course,
program.
of
And
course, and also, like, some of them would come and they would donate their baby clothes or their pusher that they're not using anymore,
hmm.
because they knowing that there are others in need, and are where they were, which is good,
Hmm.
you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so then it makes you
Yeah.
feel good that you have made an impact, and you've made that change. That is, they're not just self-centered; they are
Yeah. It's
paying it
like
forward
character
as well.
development.
Of
Yeah.
course, of course. We
Yeah.
do lots of things with character strengths, and what the character strengths are and what they need working on. So we do have well-being sessions as well, not only
Yeah.
academic. Yeah,
Aw, that's awesome.
yeah.
You just kind of fell into it, but what do you think are your strengths or your gifts to be able to not just be an educator, to be an educator in this particular program?
Um, like you did touch on it right at the start. I consider myself a good listener,
Mm, yep,
and with
definitely.
listening, with listening comes remembering. So I think I've got a very, very good memory.
He really does. Let's not get into that right now. We've just got 30 years worth of stories we will not reveal today.
So I've got
Anyway,
a good memory, so I could always remind people things that happened 30 years ago
right, right.
in case they forgot. And
I'll never forget the brownies. I just kept baking them and baking them and baking them, and they got harder and harder and harder. Those first
yeah,
set of brownies I
yeah,
tried to make you. I don't think I've tried to bake for you
yeah.
since, but it's okay.
So that is
We have
definitely,
Kevin around to bake for
yeah,
us,
we
right?
do, we do. And then I think lots of my uh, things I could get across is I often use humor
Mm-hmm.
and as a way of just breaking the ice and just getting things done or getting things across. And yeah, that's about. And I think I'm kind. I
You're a
think I'm
good
mindful.
giggler.
What?
Yeah, you are.
And
I said
I'm a
you're a
good.
good giggler. I mentioned that.
Yes, and um, I'm always loving to learn new things, and that my students teach me on a daily basis something new. I'm not
Right,
something that I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, but
right.
I feel that it does help me as a teacher having a good
Well,
memory.
and you are kind. I will say you are kind. And there's like, I don't know, this is probably that whole thing of being a people watcher who just can then engage in conversation. There's like a confidence about you. Does that well, I think there's a
Sometimes
confidence.
I think that initially I could come across as very shy because I like to first observe,
Uh-huh.
and once I feel comfortable in observing, I think then I let my guard down a bit. But
Hmm.
otherwise, I think we probably all just have different traits. But I mean, listening and people
Yeah.
watching and having a good memory and respecting others and yeah, that's probably what
And a
I
huge
need.
heart. I mean, you have a huge heart that you always do want to know. There's that inquisitive, like,
Oh yeah, I'm very
you do want
inquisitive.
to,
And,
like,
yeah, no, no more, no more.
she
I'm
never
like a,
wants to miss out
I
either.
know
So,
I've got
right?
bad FOMO. I've got a fear of missing out, but I've also have
Okay.
a joy in not knowing.
That's right. That's right. It's all good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
definitely. Awesome. So, you touched a little bit earlier on your self care, but what else like keeps you centered and focused? You have this shift going on in your schedule right now, but is there anything else that like really helps keep you
Sometimes
grounded and ready to do
yeah,
this?
what I do find is we do have a bit of debriefing after each day,
Okay.
and I think
Uh-huh.
debriefing does help just to let go and just leave some things at work and not come home with that. But for
Right.
me, it is difficult because I do work with my husband, but it's probably a
Right.
good person to debrief with and bounce off each other. And I think that is a good thing and not
Right.
bottling everything up. I think
Right.
it's good, not venting necessarily, but just debriefing and just talking to like-minded people and not just keeping everything to yourself, and also to be a sharer. You know, often
Hmm.
people are not willing to share, so you reinventing the wheel all the time. So that's one of the things that I do. I like to share
Hmm.
resources. I
Hmm.
also like to mentor others, or if people are looking to be, need help with anything, I like to help with that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I
so I
mean,
mean,
I'm sure you're considered a lead teacher on your staff. Like,
yes, yeah, yes, I am, and it's also just good to be able to share and things that have worked over the years instead of you know just getting any old knowledge from somebody, which is
right,
maybe not the
right.
right thing. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
But that is how
So,
I.
you mentioned your husband work. He's in the school setting too. You want to? Do we want to talk about him at all? Do you want to tell? Do
I
you? Is he
but
in your
he
classroom?
Yes, he is, and
Yeah.
uh, we have this inside joke where he says that it's the only time he gets paid to listen to me. But then the advantage is that the young people in my class, we could role model relationships as well. He'd
Yeah.
bring me cups of tea, and
Right.
or something. And he says, then they would say, "Oh, Kevin's always giving you cups of tea," and I think, "Oh, so I said, well, you're not the only one that's having to do things, you know.
Right.
You
Right.
can let
Right.
your partners do things for you as well. It doesn't have to be
Right.
one-sided. And just to see how one needs to talk to each other. You don't always need to be yelling and screaming. You
Right.
could be talking to each other in a good way. Yeah. So it's actually
I've
good.
been in a lot of conversations with you and Kevin. I've never heard you yell or scream at each other. So,
Uh,
but maybe you do, and I've just never heard it. But
yeah,
lots of, I mean, deep conversations too, like that we're all engaged in.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. I
yeah,
think
that's got to be
probably
really powerful
I
for your
but
students
I
too.
think when I am agitated or annoyed, I seem to keep quiet. So that's probably a silent assassinator.
And he probably knows that.
Yes, yes. Silence, I think, is the worst ever.
Oh, yeah, it can be frustrating, right?
It
So,
can, yeah, it can be, I'm sure.
but yeah, you have a great relationship with Kevin. So
Yes,
y'all
we
are
do.
like little teenage
Yeah,
heartthrobs, weren't you? Like
we know each other too long. We know each
very
other
long time.
longer. I'm always telling him I know him longer than he knows himself.
Yeah. Well, kind of, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
how old were you all when you started dating?
15, 14, 15.
I mean,
It's a
that's
long
before you
time.
met me. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
long, long, long time. A long, long time.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
beautiful. And I
yeah.
love your girls, of course. I miss them.
Oh, so,
I don't,
so different in so many ways. They
they are.
contribute so much to our lives. I can't picture myself without them, with their different strengths and yeah,
And I
just so
remember when
different.
you're like, I'm having another baby. I'm like, you're what? so, and
Yeah,
you did, and along came Amy. And so,
of
look,
course, of
Caitlin
course.
didn't have to be on her own, but
No, no,
so,
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're great women. They're
So
great
we've
women.
come a long, long, long way, haven't we?
I mean, yes, we have. We've come a long
A
way
long,
since Disney
yeah.
World, haven't
Of
we?
course, of course.
We've been in
Uh,
Disney World together. So,
yes. And it
um,
was raining then too. I think wherever we go, it rains.
except for when we're at Happy Valley.
Yeah, no, it wasn't raining there. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, so when Delmarie has seen me as well with my sisters, because well, you've been to my home in Wisconsin with
of
my
course. Yeah.
family. You've
Met your
been with,
parents.
I mean, you've met all of my friends, I think, pretty
Yeah.
much. Like,
Yes,
yeah,
I have.
met my parents, met my sisters. My sisters were like my two eldest sisters were with me
Yeah.
in Australia for at least part of the time when I was
Yes.
there. So
It was so much fun.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had a great time. We were very active.
We were.
I was envisioning
I
coming
still, I
to.
still, I still can't believe how you thought Australian chocolates were the best.
So true confession, I just found one of my Australian chocolate bars. It has a couple pieces left.
Is
Barossa
it?
Valley. I have a
Yeah,
couple of
yeah,
pieces left. Yes, I've been like, squirreling them away for a rainy
yeah, yeah.
day. So yeah,
That's good.
definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, we love Australian chocolates. We enjoyed some other Australian treats as well.
You
So
did. You did.
it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
You live in a beautiful place, and Cape Town
Thank you.
was also a beautiful place. So
Oh, this
loved
the
Cape Town as
yeah.
well.
Cape Town will probably always be one of my top favorites. It's always good
Right.
to go back, but now I think Australia is my home,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I enjoy a
It,
bit of both worlds. I'm privileged enough to do
yeah.
that. Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah.
And you're able to travel back and forth.
Of
And
course, of course,
she's
of
a good
course.
traveler. She's an agile traveler. Let's put it that way.
I don't think it's so good anymore trying to get over the jet lag. It's still taking a bit longer now that I'm getting a bit older. It's not
Yeah.
easy closing that gap because there's 8.5 hours difference between
Yeah.
South Africa and Australia, even almost a day in
Right.
with the States. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Even more so with the States. We're like,
yeah.
I think currently 15 and a half hours different, I
Wow,
think.
that's a long time.
So
Yeah,
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 it was like I had to do a lot of math in order to figure out what time am I actually meeting you for this
yeah. I
call.
know.
We usually
Uh,
just call each other. It's
yeah,
not
of
a
course. Yeah, yeah.
FaceTime. So
But I really looked forward to doing this, and I actually enjoyed it.
I have enjoyed it too. I do have some standard closing questions if you're
Of
ready for
course,
some of them. And you
of
may
course.
have shared some of this already, but do you have a quote or mantra you live by? And if so, what is it? Or a few of them?
Yes, I do. I have quite I've jotted some of them down. Some of them
Yeah.
I've already actually mentioned, but
From our beloved Mandela.
I've
Okay.
actually written it down
All right.
if I can find it. Oh, I live by an Zulu African. I'm sure you've heard it before. Ubuntu,
Yes.
Ubuntu. It's an ancient African word meaning humanity, humanity to others. I am what I am because of who we all are. So that's my mantra. I am because we are.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've originated from the African soil, that is probably why I am who we all are, and I am because of you. There's so many people that have contributed to my life, and past and present, and it's always changing. And I don't think
Right.
that one's life would always be the same because it would always be evolving and changing. But I am because we are.
Yeah, that one's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I have preached about that before, but I don't know that people remember it all the time because I've learned that one from Desmond Tutu along the way. I
That's
love
correct.
him as well. These amazing elders that we
Of
really have
course, of
lost in
course, of
these last
course.
couple decade,
Yeah,
decade with the passing of both of these amazing South
yeah.
African
It's,
men.
it's almost
So,
like Ubuntu would be like a it takes a village to raise a child.
hmm
So it takes
yeah,
a village to raise a person, and that village doesn't necessarily have to be small. It could be a world village that's raising
right,
all of us, yeah, which is so
yeah,
important. And not
yeah,
forgetting, as you're saying, forgetting our elders and where we come from and who has contributed to our lives, and who is still
hmm
continuing to contribute, which is so important.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Yay. Any others? Any other quotes or mantras?
I probably have to include my other favorite, which is Maya Angelou.
Yes.
She's one of my all-time favorites, and one of her mantras that I've also written down is be that change to empower these young women. That is one of,
hmm
and also to do better now that they know better. I think I've did use some of those words when I was talking. So,
Uh-huh.
uh, which is so important that we need to empower young people. And
hmm
she's been, I mean, she's empowered so many young people, and with all her quotes what and all those beautiful poems that she's written, that is
Right.
so inspiring.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it never gets tired. I never
Right.
tire of them.
Yeah,
And
timeless. Yeah.
when you read them, it's like you've never read them before, but you have.
hmm
That is so
Right.
empowering for me. Yeah. But to do better
Beautiful.
is because you know now that you know better,
Yeah,
which is so
definitely.
important. Yeah.
Good thing to remember. Yay. Do you have any books or resources that you want to lift up that others might
Uh,
look
Again,
at or no?
just the I mean, it's probably everything is so personal, and the Long Road to Freedom of Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
That's one of the books that I always treasure. But there's no real other book that stands out uh, unless, like, if you are a Christian. I mean, the Bible will probably be the book that stands out, and you are probably going to draw verses from there as well. But there's no real favorite book
Right.
that really stands out right now.
I would never be able to pick my favorite book. It's the one that I'm
It's
reading right now that I love, because I love so many of them.
Yeah.
So,
It's just
um,
hard to choose one particular book. Yeah,
but the long, long walk to freedom,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
If you don't know anything about South Africa, or if you're like, what are they talking about when they're talking about apartheid, that is a book to read, definitely.
Of
And it's
course, of
it's
course.
it's a big book, but
It
it is
is a,
well worth it.
of course, yeah,
I do
yeah.
think it's an Audible as well. I think you can listen to
I
it.
think
So,
probably you could, you
I don't
know.
know that
I'm
Mandela read
still,
it though.
I'm still very old school when it comes to certain
Yeah,
books. I just
yeah,
can't read them on a Kindle, or I just need that papers to flip through.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I love
please,
to listen to books, and I think honestly think part of why I love to listen to books is because I didn't feel like I got enough of childhood reading to me, not
yeah,
to be all pity again. So I just love to listen to them. So
yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
maybe I'm more of an auditory learner, but I do remember the first time I listened to a book, I like it wasn't the same as when I read it and saw it, and but I think I'm
yeah.
getting better at
But at
at
least, but at least
listener.
we know that there are different options. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
you
Different
alternative to
ways to
reading.
read.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Um, okay, well, what parting words of encouragement do you have for our listeners? Anything you want to pass on before we wrap
Uh,
up?
as I said before, that teaching is everybody's business, not just teachers' business. And I think there are parents that need to step up a bit.
Hmm.
And I think it would, if more parents step up, I think it would make teachers' lives so much easier. And probably just have
Right.
that teacher mindset, yeah, when it comes to
Yeah.
that. But as I said, education should be everybody's business, not just teachers' business.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Yeah,
Thank,
we all need
thank.
to remember that.
We do,
So,
we do.
yay.
Yeah.
Well, Delmarie, sorry, is there anywhere that if our listeners wanted to not necessarily find out more about you, but find out more about the program where you work, or maybe even send some support in some ways, is there anywhere where we can find you on the World Wide Web, or
Yeah,
your program, your school, something?
yeah. Up the You can contact my school, or if anybody wants to contact me personally, you have my email, and they can email
If you
me.
want to contact her personally, you have to get through me first.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Come
but
direct
and
to the source.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. I'll
Don't go
just tell you
through.
what you need to
Don't
know.
come through middle parties. Just come straight to the source.
Right. So,
Too much red tape in this world.
yeah, definitely. What's the name of your school? Can you share that?
Christies Beach High School.
Christies
Christies
Beach High
Beach High
School.
School. Yeah.
And so they and listeners can
But
find that.
we the flexible learning program.
Flexible Learning
Learning
Program.
program.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So maybe just search for that as well. Flexible
Yeah.
Learning Program.
That's
Christie's
correct.
Beach High School.
That's correct.
Cool. I
Thank
don't
you
want
so
our
much.
conversation to end. I mean, our
We
conversations never
we
really end.
our conversations will never end. We'll keep them here all day because we'll
I
never
know.
get tired of talking to each other.
I know. We won't. And we'll have to like catch up like this weekend so we can talk about our
We do,
dog.
we do, we do,
So,
we do. But thanks so
man,
much for having me.
thanks
I
so much
really
for doing
enjoyed this
this.
so much.
It's been awesome, and I miss you already. So,
No worries.
um, but we'll chat again soon, okay? And
No
thank you all
worries.
so much for listening to Conversations for Peace with Delmarie Brownridge
Thank
from.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.